All right, here's how we make the French onion soup. I've got 2 red onions here. Red onions are the nicest to use. Cut the ends off, peel off the paper, any bruises, mold. Make sure they're nice like this. Make sure your knife is sharp. You can either cut these in really thin rounds, or I just find that it's less slippery if I cut them in half and then cut off the rainbow end like this. So cut them really thin. That's the ticket. And then in the pan, I've got about 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then about a teaspoon of ghee. You can use butter. And then you're just going to take these slices and you're going to put them in the pan. I'm going to make, I'm going to use broth. Oops, that's already made, a box of broth, which ends up being 32 ounces. This is what I'm using. You can make your own beef stock if you want. You can even use bouillon if you're in a pinch. Technically, that's not really authentic, but you know, whatever. It still gives you the same flavors. When you get to this piece, hold it like this and then run your knife down the middle so that you don't cut yourself, but you can still get a thin slice off of there. All right, and then I'm going to turn this pan on to medium. Just let it get started. Don't worry if they're not completely uniform. Like I said, I am not a chef. I just like to cook. So I'm not going to stress that these aren't completely even. I am digging in with my fingernails here, as you see. You're going to want to, like I said, hold this knife, pinch the blade, and hold the handle with these two so you can control over it. Going like this, like with a steak knife or something, I've seen people do it, and I actually just caught myself doing it here, but you have more chance of it slipping if you do that. So let's not do that. And you know, sometimes the end piece is too big. I don't want to take a chance of getting, you know, it's slipping and cutting me, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Or you could save it for something else. I actually probably could have just saved it because I know we're making the satay later, but whatever. Sometimes that happens. And actually, I decided I'm only going to use the 1 onion. This I'll use later for something else. That looks like plenty of onions. And it depends on how oniony you like it. If you think that you're going to want more, then of course put in more. And then I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I use a wooden spatula since this is a non-stick pan. You can do this in a stock pot. Like if I had a Dutch oven handy, I would use that, something that's taller. But really what we want these to do is start cooking here, and then we're gonna let them cook down so they get all nice and soft. Color comes out of them and they will caramelize. Actually, I'm gonna turn it up to high to get it going. Right now I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of kosher salt. And then I'm going to add some finely ground black pepper, about the same amount. Maybe less, maybe half a teaspoon to a teaspoon, depending on what you like. You can always add more. It's just harder to take out things if you've overdone it. All right, so once this starts cooking here, later, I'll add some dried thyme. If you have fresh thyme, that's the best. I'm also going to get out some crusty bread. I'm not eating it right now, but I know my kid is. So I just buy these frozen demi baguettes. I'm going to take one of these out let it thaw. I'll put it in the toaster oven for a little bit, and then I will use this to make the bread that goes on the top. I'm not eating bread, like I said, or cheese right now, so I'm just going to top mine with some, you can use pork rinds, or you can use maybe some kettle chips, something like that. Or you could just eat it without the topping. I mean, the topping is pretty much what makes it, right? The bread, and then or croutons you could use. You could even use croutons, buy pre-made croutons. And then you'll need some Gruyere or some Swiss cheese to put on top, and then you broil that, and that's what makes that cheesy topping. All right, we're starting to cook here. And I'm going to add some garlic. If you have fresh garlic, you could put it in now, maybe like 1 clove. And if you're using jarred garlic, we'll just wait a while so that it doesn't overcook. Starting to cook. And I'm going to turn it down because I don't really want them to brown. I just want them to slowly wilt, saute. I'm going to keep stirring them while the heat comes down a little bit. Onion aroma is getting in my eyes, so I want to turn on the fan, and I just cracked the window a little bit wider. Going to say the nice thing about these things, if you break them in half before you put them in the freezer, then you can only pull out a half of a loaf at a time. We can use these also for the bocadillos when we make the tortilla. Okay, so once this pan isn't so hot anymore, you can just let these cook. You can see some of them are already starting to become translucent. That's what we're after. Okay, I'll come back in a second. Okay, it's been about 3-4 minutes. The onions are getting really soft, so that's how we want them. You can just let them cook a little bit longer. If you have fresh thyme, you're going to take the sprig and you're going to pull backwards against the direction that the leaves grow and just use the leaves. I have some dried thyme here. I'm going to use about a teaspoon. And I'm going to put in, like I said, about 1 garlic clove's worth of garlic. And then I'm going to put in a pinch of nutmeg. Just like a pinch. Well, I guess it's not. It's a little more than a pinch. Maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon. All right, now to add the broth. It smells so good, the herbs. And that's about half the container. And I think that's about how I want it. The ratio of broth to onions. If you want to make a big pot of this, use twice as many onions. Like, so use two whole onions, and then you can use the whole container of broth. All right, and then I can just have this come back to a boil, and then this is done. You'll just cut a piece of bread. If you use croutons, that's perfect. If you're going to use the French baguette, you'll need to cut a slice off. You can go as thick as like 1 inch or maybe 1.5 inches. You can make it thick. But you're going to want to put some butter or olive oil on that on both sides and heat it, toast it until it's really crunchy. Because if you just put bread in there, it's just going to become soggy. The point of the crouton is that it takes a little while to soften, so you're not just eating a blob of soggy bread. And then you'll put either shaved Swiss cheese or Gruyere, or you could use even like a slice, put it over the top and put that under the broiler for a minute or two till it starts bubbling, and then eat it. And if you don't want to deal with the broiler, or you don't have a broiler, you could just put the cheese in there and it will melt, and it is kind of the same. Put the croutons in first, then the cheese, and let it melt. All right, so that's that. Enjoy. I did want to show you one other thing. These are canning jars, right? These are these ball canning jars, and this is a canning funnel. You can buy it in the canning section, but it really helps to get things into canning jars without spilling it everywhere. I'm going to pour this soup in here, and then I'm going to let it cool, and then I can just put a cap on it and put it in the fridge. It's a nice way to store it. You can take it in your lunch like this if you're going to take it with you. And I'll just leave a little bit of space in there. And then I will fill the other one. This doesn't really preserve it. You'll still have to eat it within a couple, 3 days, but it'll store it well. And if it's not quite even, you can just add a little bit more broth to even that out. All right, so see how they're not quite the same amount in the jars? I'll just add a little bit of broth. There. Those can sit out to cool a little bit, and then I will put them in the fridge.